And particularly, there's a lot of hype around mobiles at the moment. I've actually never been convinced that that mobile learning is something that's going to be ever successful. Yeah, maybe with the new generation of smartphones, things are changing. But if you look at a couple of years ago, what most mobiles in Africa, it was, in my humble opinion, sort of crazy to actually think that these could be really effective learning devices for young people. Maybe the new generation of mobile phones. So I'm going to be exploring ways in which mobiles, people with disabilities, China, to bring those three things together. And maybe I'm have a wonderful opportunity at Beijing, Peking University. Maybe they'll want me to go back, and then we can do more work together.
Great. Seeing your book behind you, is there something you would do differently now when writing this book? It's not that far, that long ago that you wrote it, but still, has there something changed since you published it finally? Were there major movements?
I'm not sure 100%. Perhaps I could have emphasised mobiles more, because much of the book was actually written, say, 2007-8, and I probably didn't predict just how rapidly in Africa mobile technology would take off. I think the arrival of the submarine cable off East Africa and the potential for cable to transform what's happening in East Africa, maybe I didn't emphasise that enough. But actually, reflecting and listening today, one of the things that probably saddens me most about the field is how little it's changed. We're hearing much the same things that we've heard for 3, 4, 5 years. Wouldn't it have been fantastic if I could honestly say that everything I wrote in the book's been transformed? That would be brilliant. But my failure is to get that message enough across. I mean, in the book, I write very much about focusing. ICT4D should be for development, so it's focusing on the development needs, focusing on actually what we mean by development. How are we going to use ICTs to transform that? How are we going to differentiate between information and communication? Lots of things that I've heard at this conference. I was writing about 2 or 3 years ago, and so I failed to get the message across enough. Or maybe not enough people have read the book, but that's that's their fault, not mine. So it'll be it'll be valid for a few years to come at this rate.
That's good, but bad at the same time, is it?
Yeah, I think there are real constraints in the way in which academia is constructed that mean that academics perhaps can't do the sorts of research that needs to be done. They have to publish papers in certain kinds of journal, they have to get certain kinds of research grants. And actually that makes it quite difficult to do really innovative research. And the whole academic publishing structure, for example.
But isn't the internet shaping this as well?
Come and hear my session tomorrow. No, I'm talking on the publishing session. I seriously think there's an alternative model where we could just publish everything on the internet and then actually have users judging what's good, and that then comes to the top of the pile. But even then you don't get truly innovative. The most innovative things are the things that people haven't yet thought of, so the non-accepted norms. And there is an argument that if you just do that, you'll find everybody replicating what they want. They're not going to identify the most innovative. And we have to inculcate a culture of creativity and not learn and regurgitate. And far too much academic work, I think, is sadly, in certain parts of the world, still very much about learning and regurgitating. It's not about encouraging things that are going to be transformatory.
That's an interesting point, actually. So, what's your working definition of development, and who are the most impaired? You promised us.
Yeah. Well, I thought I sort of spoke about that, but no. As you may know, I've been heavily influenced throughout my career by the Frankfurt School and critical theory, and so. Jürgen Habermas, for example. This is the academic coming out, isn't it? But he defines sort of 3 kinds of science: empirical analytic science, historical hermeneutic science, and critical science. And I've always tried to. I'm not sure I actually agree with all of that, but I've been heavily influenced by the notion of critical science, that in a sense it's about encouraging people to reflect on their conditions, and through that reflection understand how they can change those conditions and make the world a better place. And I don't accept that that's just an Enlightenment project. I think long before the Enlightenment there were people who actually believed that it was possible to make the world better. And so, to me, development is actually not about economic growth, not even about sort of human development indices or Sen's notion of freedoms. It's a moral agenda, and it's about how those of us, well, in Western societies or civilized societies that actually decide that there's something called a university that's worth having, and they're willing to invest in that, that societies think that's valuable, and look at Britain today. There's a vote in the House of Lords that undergraduates are going to, may as a result have to pay £9,000 a year for fees. We don't. You could say we're no longer a civilised society because we're not doing that. We're not. You could always sidetrack me, but the development is about helping people make choices that improve their life conditions. And there is so much poverty in the world, and it's almost obscene that we are focusing on an agenda which is about economic growth to increase or to eliminate or fight against absolute poverty. The easiest way to reduce absolute poverty is just to devalue the dollar, and you'll have half as few people $1 a day. If you're going to talk about economic aspects, the more if you increase economic growth, you increase the potential for relative poverty to increase. That there'll be the difference between the poorest and the so we have to move away from this crass focus on economic growth as being development. And if we want to have economic, it's got to be working to reduce inequality, and that's where the role of the state comes in. The market, and much ICT is about really the market. States have to intervene at some point, because the market will never serve the interests of the poorest, and that's where the states can come in, and that's where maybe academics, and it's not us. It's not about us saying that this is what the future should be. It's about us supporting people in those positions to help them have the lives that they want to. That's a long, rambling, complex answer, but I don't want to give a simple answer to what development is.
I loved it.
Just one question, because you said before this in Britain, as students have to pay so much for the university fees. Could ICTs play also a role in Britain to kind of develop society?
Yes, well, this is about 6. I don't know whether you knew this, but about 6 weeks ago, maybe a bit longer, I was arguing very vehemently that if I was the Vice Chancellor, I would buck the trend completely and imagine this as a marketing ploy, actually not charging students fees at all. And I have a model whereby a university can function like that, which is very exciting. The other thing, though, that out of that discussion I'm doing, not many people know this, but I've amazingly the URL, thefreeuniversity.eu, was not taken. And so one thing that I may spend the next 10 years of my life doing is creating a truly free university. And this is not to do with free content. I mean, there's so much free content out there nowadays. But if you accept that a university is very different from higher education, higher education can still be teaching people to learn and regurgitate. But a university is about bringing together people who can dream about changing the world and making it a better place, who are really innovative, really creative, aren't just replicant mutants. So what you want to do is you bring together the brightest academics in the world who believe that agenda with the brightest young people in the world and enable them to interact. That's what people pay to go to university to. It's not to learn content that, I mean, look, there's just so much content. It's about that interaction, and sadly so many universities in Britain and across the world are focusing just on giving people content, and many UK universities, for example, actually senior academics spend very little time with the students. They're busy doing research and publishing papers in prestigious journals and going to wonderfully prestigious conferences like this, rather than interacting with students. Which actually another part is why I'm so pleased that some of my undergraduates who do my ICT for D course are helping, as well as most of my postgrads. Again, that community, and it's bringing, so the Free University, there are other free universities out there, but the Free University is actually going to make that happen, and ICTs have a huge role to play in it. So watch this space.
That's exciting, yeah.
I've had a little conference to organise, so one of the things I'm going to be doing next year is actually, in my mind the principles exist, the website, there is a blog, which gives the bare bones of what I'm about, but that's something I may invest a lot of time in.
That sounds great. Okay, that's a very promising look into the future, is it?
I hope so. But it's also looking back into the past. It's going back to Plato, Socrates, and the origins of European thought, which was open. It was about this dialogue, this disputation, this bringing people together, the origins of the dialectic and these discussions, because there is a role for academia, and it is so valuable, and it's been so damaged in much of our society, not just in Britain but elsewhere, and I want to sort of reclaim the university for what it should be.
Okay.
What a
Great.
final sentence.
Okay, thank you very much. That was great.
Well, thank